Going live.
All right. Thank you for listening to an episode of Transparency and Merit. My name's Joe. I'm here with Brian. And tonight we have a wonderful show for you. It's Dylann Roof versus Colin Ferguson. Brian, what say you?
I say that these two gentlemen are very much alike. There may be a few things that are a little bit different, but they are very much alike in their ideology. The only difference is Colin Ferguson gets much more support in the black community.
Let's back up. Let's back up a quick second. Colin Ferguson, a black man. Dylann Roof, a white man.
Yeah.
I'll give my thoughts on this later, but go ahead.
But Dylann Roof murdered people in a church. Colin Ferguson murdered people in a subway. They were both motivated by racial hatred. Dylann Roof was born in America. Colin Ferguson was born in the West Indies.
Wow.
They basically, immigrated his hate for white people to a predominantly white country and went on a subway and murdered people. Dylann Roof got all this racial propaganda, went into a church and murdered people. And basically, they are the same type of hatred, angry hatred type of people. But I see much more support in the black community for Colin Ferguson than I do for Dylann Roof. One of the things I see when you type in Colin Ferguson is saying that he didn't get any Burger King like Dylann Roof does. And my response was, well, why don't you get Colin Ferguson some Burger King? Maybe some Burger King for justice. Angela, do you have anything to add?
I believe that the Roof incident was a fake incident. If you even look at the trial when he was presented,
Bravo.
Every single church member said that they forgave him. Now, if somebody killed your friends, family, loved ones, you would not
There's
just
no
instantly
forgiveness. Not
forgive
that quick.
them.
Not that quick.
No.
Well, I mean, you know what?
It's a great point.
That is something that remains to be seen. That is a really far off kind of thought here. I believe that both men are murderers.
By the way, there are some people out there that put some credence to these sorts of things, but I'm just going to throw this out there. Dylann Roof killed 33 people. Just throwing it out there.
You know that didn't happen. That's all fake.
Dylann Roof killed how many people?
33.
Oh my head! He killed that is quite a bit of people that he murdered.
Quite a big hoax, if you ask me.
But I mean, but in my opinion, and look, if anyone has anything to add to this,
I will. I'm just going to say that you got to look at the childhood picture of Dylann Roof. He looks exactly like an actor named John Christian Gross. Just saying.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to. I'm calling
not
insane.
The mainstream. This is not the mainstream story.
And usually I don't swear, but I'm calling insane bullshit on this.
Okay.
No fucking way.
What makes it so real?
Those murders did happen. This is insanity. But continue. We allow for things that I believe are completely off base.
It could be. It could be.
It could be. But I would. As of now, suppose it did happen.
All right.
Again, I'm saying that if you look at the reaction in the white community as opposed to the black community.
Please make a note that Brian has asked me to just believe for a second that this did happen. So I'm going to step into my believing boots and say,
don't do it.
Okay.
Shut up, Angela.
Angela's on fire tonight.
He's a big boy and he wants to put on his believing. I just want to put.
Angela came through with the biggest comment of the night.
No, let me just say this.
She has got great timing.
Let me just say this.
Okay.
First of all, suppose it's a bunch of crap and it's just all acting in movies. Mm-hmm. There is still, and those who believe it, you have to admit, there's more support for Colin Ferguson than there in the black community than there is in the white community for Dylann Roof. Would anyone disagree or agree with that?
I think you feel your construct crumbling to the ground.
No, false. Okay, what? Okay, again.
Yes, your construct is falling to the ground. I must add something. Ferguson is not a big deal in the white community. It never will be. Because some people just don't matter.
Okay, on a street level.
White people don't matter.
Yeah, on the street level, does this Dylann Roof story make a difference, Brian?
This Dylann, okay, like I said, I am drawing a contrast between Dylann Roof and Colin.
Construct.
Okay.
The white guy versus the black guy.
The white guy versus the black guy.
Or the West Indies guy.
Is it more of a construct
just to make it...
or a contrast?
I think it's a construct because we develop those. We make those as a society, like a moray.
Well,
it's very similar in my opinion. And my last
sooner
comment
or
on
later,
that is that we're talking about responses,
sooner
not
or
the
later,
actual
you're
situation.
going to have to face this point of view, Brian, because not enough people are buying these stories anymore, and then they start to look back in history and start questioning the validity of even stories like this. So I'm gonna, for the sake of the show. And I think the show should have a balanced view where what if this never happened versus what if it did. And I think you should
Well, if
be
we're
able
going
to
to go
both
for
as
what
well.
if it did,
Yes.
the majority, okay, first of all, the majority of people in this country and in this world who've heard of these murders
Right.
believe that these murders happened. And I just, what is the motivation for this to be done? What is the motivation for that?
You mean as if it were real or if it were not real?
What is the motivation for it to be
If
fake?
it were real.
Oh,
What
absolutely.
is the motivation for it to be fake? I'm asking.
It's
Oh,
everything.
wow.
It's everything you've hook, line, and sinkered, man. It's the construct. It is a piece of division. Not only that, but then there's gun control and all these other things that pop up around it out in the aftermath. But there's don't think for a second.
Done it before.
Yeah, don't think for a second this doesn't have to do with keeping people scared and making a run for their guns and keeping a construct alive. This is a Tavistock Playbook 101.
I say something at this point. In 1648, race became a social construct. It did not exist before 1648. Nationalities existed. And now we're seeing a transfer at this point.
Again,
transition.
And that is an interesting point. I don't have that good of biology degree, but there are people that believe that it is also a biological construct. And like if you were to go into a doctor's office and you were to disregard race, the race of the person, you could be a doctor could be basically I don't know what you call it when a doctor is like not disbarred, but a doctor could lose his license.
Malpractice.
Malpractice for saying that. So it is. There are biological differences in the races.
There's haplogroups, but that does not have to do with race. It's from the area of the world that you came from, like the Congo or Northern Europe. All those different haplogroups.
You know what I mean? And if I were to do this on this transparency and merit, I would want to have somebody with a strong biology background.
I'm going to also
throw out
another motive, and this is more of a long game thing that's been played out since 1993, with the just the mass addiction to mood stabilizing drugs and medications. It's a mental health issue all the way, and what you see now are more of these unrepentant. Dylann Roof was one of the first but look at his face, man. Look at his face. It's there's no emotion there. He's portraying right the no affect white guy, young white guy who's in mental turmoil, and that's only just gotten way worse. Not one of the first. I'm sorry, this was in 2015, so there had been a whole bunch of other ones, but this was right in the wake of all those other shootings that really, the profiles were so bizarre. The James Holmes and I
had connections with James Holmes.
Well, we'll get there one day too. I think we're going to have a battle with James Holmes as well.
But I do want to, before we close out, when I talked about the social construct of race being developed in 1648, that happened in the Virginia Commonwealth. You can look that up. It has nothing to do with biology, but the shade of humanity that you find in your skin. And they were doing this to control the masses because there was very few planters. So think of that in comparison, contrast to Roof and the other people today.
I mean, there's also a whole thing about slavery. Now, Angela, what do you think of slave reparations?
No, absolutely not. Because how can you definitively prove that your, fourth great grandmother Esther was a slave? How do you prove it? On that basis, I say no.
What about because the Japanese were given things, what about reparations?
But they were itemized. The people were actually itemized. We knew who they were and their descendants. This is a different matter. They were not itemized. I know that sounds cold, but again, there would be so much fraud. We would have senators and representatives, white ones getting reparations.
That's an interesting point. Do you believe that black people built America?
I believe Americans built America. And it depends on what part of America you're talking about.
Do you think black slavery was one of the reasons for America's wealth?
Yes.
Now, why didn't the black slaves in Brazil make make Brazil as wealthy as America? I mean, they had more black slaves.
I think it would have to be the industry that they had in their country. You can, I assume, well, that sounds bad. We had viable commodities like tobacco, cotton, which was not the biggest crop in America. It was tobacco and other crops ahead of cotton. So I think you would have to look at the economic factors for that.
Because, Brazil has a lot of natural resources. And didn't Brazil also have tobacco and sugar and many other natural resources as well? And
they did, but
and why is? But because Brazil is like, Brazil is a completely, it may be a second world, but it's pretty much a third world country like the rest of Latin America. Isn't it maybe our Constitution and the way we set up law here in America that made America what it is and not slavery?
Well, there was more access to America than there was to Brazil. England was across the ocean. Brazil was much further down. I think you have to look at the economic model.
Yeah, well, I guess being closer to Europe made it more wealthy. But as I've said before, I believe, and one of the things that kind of pissed me off, and now I just kind of laugh at it, and I've said this before on this show, when reading comments about Colin Ferguson, first of all, there are people that idolize him. If you go on any YouTube page and you type in Colin Ferguson, the subway shooter, there are people that love him, blacks. And also there are lots of blacks who draw the comparison, like as Dylann Roof was given Burger King. Like that, it's just such a stupid thing to say. And I've made comments, and I actually did a show. I think I did a show called Colin Ferguson Deserves His Burger King, or maybe a cheeseburger for Colin. And I think on this issue,